Hi, welcome to this week's edition of the Blues Talk. We're going John, Dave, and myself. We're going to look back over Leinster's pretty amazing win against Ulster, all the other URC action, and look forward to the first round of the Champions Cup at the weekend. So, lads, 38-29, kind of a run-of-the-mill Leinster game. Four tries to five. We scored the fifth, and pretty epic game, actually, in fairness, wasn't it?
Certainly was. I thought we were dead and buried nearly at halftime. Well, if we hadn't come back with that try before halftime, going in 22-3 at halftime is even worse than halftime in 2011, which, let's face it, was a pretty miraculous comeback. The fact that we came back to 10, I still thought with 14 men, we had it all to do, and we weren't handling the ball well. Ulster's defence, the UDR, the Ulster Defence Regiment was in good form, and we weren't making yards through them, and when we did, we were dropping the ball. That all changed, however, in the second half, which ball started to stick, and what Leo and the lads would call looking after the ball. We did a lot more looking after.
That's they might have had the UDR, but we had the IRA in Ringrose's arms.
Let's get a few more references in there.
Yeah. Is there anyone else we could be more offensive to, just for the hell of it?
Fair enough. Well, okay, I'll leave the regiment out. The Ulster defence was very, very strong.
Yeah, no, it was a really, really, really. The second half, the first half, you couldn't give us the ball without us dropping it, and we dropped it a lot. But we were doing a lot of things well. It's just when we came to that final moment or whatever, the ball would get dropped and stuff like that. And Ulster were really good in transition. They took their opportunities when Healy got sent off. They went straight to the corner, got the maul going, got over from the maul. Then they did something similar for the Treadwell try. They took their opportunities well. Their transition was good for the third try. But I think that, us getting that try just before half time with, no time left in the clock, that made it 12 points, and that gave them the kind of the heebie-jeebies. And it set a tone for the second half. We came out of the blocks for the second half. All the stuff we were doing well in the first half, we kept doing. All the stuff we were doing badly in the first half, we started doing well. And as has happened before, they weren't able to really cope with it.
But isn't it funny that they only scored, they were 22-3 at one point, as we said, and they only scored their bonus point try when they were dead and buried. It was literally the 78th minute or something where they scored their bonus point try. We'd already gone up to whatever it was, 38 points at that stage. And there was, there were no hope of getting a losing bonus point to go with it. They were they were lucky to get that extra point. Not that it's going to get them much closer to us, but it might come in handy against some of the sides later on in the season, rather than not getting it at all. But yeah, I was very impressed with the organisation and resolve, and the way Van der Fleer covering the wing, and lots of things the way their kicking game should have really put us to bed in the second half with one person less in the backfield. But we seemed to be able to cover it, and in fact we won most of the kicking tennis in the second half. It seemed like you would have expected them to target that part of our game and to just do territory. All they really wanted out of the second half, if they'd have got a fourth try early rather than late, that might have put the doubt into our heads. Here we are, 14 men, we're down by over 29-10, and things don't look very well for us. But it wasn't to be. As somebody said after the game, I'd say Ulster are sick to death of losing to Leinster. I know they beat us twice back to back last year, but that was the second time they beat us in the RDS last year.
I'd say it's not so much that they're sick of losing to Leinster. I'd say they're sick of losing games like that where they should really be winning, where they've set up themselves in an advantage and they just drift away. I mean, they almost lost the Munster match earlier this season when they like totally dominated the first half and barely scraped home. They've done it in the URC, in they've done it in Europe in knockout games. Okay, Leinster have done it to them more often, but you kind of expect that because Leinster are a very good team. They're one of the best in Europe. But Ulster have this, I don't want to say weakness because it's the wrong word, but there is a frailty there, which is a synonym for weakness, I know. But there is a frailty there in their mental process that as soon as things go slightly against them, they kind of fall apart a bit. And we saw that on Saturday in the second half. All Leinster's big players, you look at the guys who were outstanding in that second half, they were the guys, the international guys. There was Porter, Furlong when he came on, Sheehan when he came on, Kelleher when he was on, Jenkins, Ryan, Van der Fleer, Ringrose, Gibson Park, who hadn't had a great first half, but he was very good in the second. James Lowe started coming in looking for the ball. The big name players stood up, whereas for Ulster, they kind of sat down.
Yeah, sadly for them, they did, but happily for us.
I thought there was like three significant players for us. You listed off a good few in there, but I thought like Ringrose is obviously a seasoned international, but I think he actually became a leader of the team, and hopefully can sort of step into the boots of the leadership that Sexton shows when he's gone next year. I thought Ryan Baird, like he does a lot of very flashy stuff, but I thought his contribution was exceptional in the game. And then when Porter had to come on in lieu of Healy's red card, I just thought he was the turning point in that game. He was absolutely, he won us. Like when you are, you know, you're a man down and he comes up with some fabulous turnovers that just shifted the whole balance of power in the game. And I thought those three lads were just significant factors in that win. But just going back to the Ringrose thing, I think last year, if you remember, Hume scored a couple of tries against us and he was doing all this stuff about, you know, his patting his back and all, sort of as if to say, I've arrived, I'm the man. I think Ringrose showed him why he has 30 odd caps and your man has a few bit player appearances.
Yeah,
sure. I think you're comparing two different guys at two different stages in their careers. I mean, Ringrose is a world-class centre. He's one of the best in the world. Hume is still an inexperienced, though talented, interprovincial player. Whether that'll change, we'll see. I thought you were right about Porter. At one point, if you remember, there was a turnover and Gary Ringrose put a lovely kick down the line. The Ulster winger caught it and we chased well and bundled him into touch. And it got a huge roar. It was a real energizer for the crowd.
Yeah.
But Porter came running up because there was a line out. And he stopped in front of the small terrace. And he was just like, he roaring with sinews stretched. You know, he was really, really fired up for it. And you could see it in the way he played.
Yeah. Like, I mean, but a few moments just sort of seemed to be really, you know, big game changers, like us getting that try just on the stroke of halftime, Cooney missing the conversion for McElroy's try. It was also like those, while it was only 2 points, it would have just made the gap almost insurmountable. But like I was surprised at how poor Gibson Park had played. Like, you know, I mean, I don't want to sort of try and single out one individual because I think there's a lot of them, but like really, I was one of the worst 30 minutes of rugby I've seen from Leinster in a long, long time. Like the amount of errors, I couldn't get over how many times we knocked the ball on, dropped it, true passes at feet, true passes behind people. You know, like it was just really, really poor. I wonder if they were just chewed a new one at half time because it was really, really, really poor. Like if they'd continued with that performance in the second half, they certainly wouldn't have come back and won it.
Of course. Don't forget, it was the first 30 minutes they played together in a month. Yeah, I know the Irish.
Yeah, but most of them played together for Ireland. Like
I know. But do you know who I'd say is sick actually from that game is Jimmy O'Brien. He had to go off so early. He could have had a great impact.
Although I'd say at half time he was delighted he was off because he can't be blamed for it.
Well, that's true.
You know. So.
But at full time, he was very pissed off.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. So, like, I mean, a great crowd again. There was 16,000 at it and a super atmosphere.
Yeah, it actually looked like more to me where I was sitting. It certainly felt like more. The noise was unbelievable. The atmosphere was, as you say, Jay, it was super. It was crackling. No, it was a great URC match. You know, it was one of the best ones I can remember in a long time.
Yeah.
The Sharks.
Yeah.
That was up there too.
Yeah. You know, like,
but it just shows. Sorry, Jake. It just shows what I've been saying and what we've been saying, indeed, for the last maybe 18 months, that what the league needed was jeopardy. If every team if you go into most games knowing you're going to win, it can lead to a very quiet ground. If you go into most games with that, sense of danger, it makes for a different experience. It makes for a better experience, a better fan experience. I hate to use that phrase, but it does, because everybody is on the edge of their seats.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. And like, it's sort of, there isn't much between the two teams, really. Like, while we do always seem to come out on top, particularly in those big games, there wasn't a whole lot in that game. It was, I'm sure, that must have been a very, very long bus ride back up to Belfast for the Ulster team, because they had the winning of that game, and they took their foot off Leinster's throat. And I'm sure that they'll learn from it, because they're going to have to start winning games like that. Otherwise, they're just going to be they're going to fall back into the pack,
Which we've been saying that, Jay, since Brian McLaughlin was in charge, and it's kind of an idea I posited earlier this week on Leinster fans. That is Dan Farrell the man to take Ulster to the next level. I mean, they have a habit. It's become a habit for them now of losing important games. Okay, you can excuse it if it's a Leinster or a La Rochelle or a Toulouse, but they do it a lot. And I get that sense. I said it before about mental frailty, that they don't have that self-belief. And Dan McFarlane has been there now, 3-4 years, and he doesn't seem to have instilled it in them.
They need a Mick Cheika in there pronto. Well, there's an element of Rob Penny at Munster. He just didn't have the kettle. So, like Ulster.
I don't accept that. I think he has lots of cattle. He has a good-sized herd there. I mean, we all like to joke about the amount of Leinster players. We all like to joke about the amount of Leinster players up there, but they also produce an awful lot of players up there in Ulster. I mean, okay, most of them have double digits on their back, but they do produce a lot of players. They have a school system not dissimilar to Leinster's. They have a club system not dissimilar to Leinster's. They have a ground that's paid for and debt-free and income generating. They've managed to hoover up an awful lot of grant cash from two governments due to the cross-border nature of their province. So, everything is set up there for them to be successful. They have the advantage of, that they don't kind of carry the baggage of the GAA or soccer, that they can be a kind of a cross-community thing. And all those things have happened for them. And in fairness to them, they played that card very, very well, but they still haven't gotten over the line. And there's no reason why they shouldn't. They have a team good enough to win a URC, but they're no closer to winning a URC this year than they were last year, or the year before, or the year before.
Name one ex-Leinster forward playing for Ulster that you take back in a heartbeat.
Marty Moore.
You'd have him ahead of
I'd have him ahead of Michael Alatoa, especially seeing as now he's fit. Marty Moore is one of the best props in Ireland. Is certainly worth a place in the Leinster squad. Definitely the matchday squad. He's a fantastic footballer. He's a brilliant scrummager. Now there are issues around his application, but that seems to have been ironed out this year.
He doesn't look the fittest now, I have to say. He is a great scrummager, but I don't know. He might be the closest thing you would of Leinster forwards that you would take back, but I wouldn't be rushing up to M1 to take him back,
But it's not about the guys you take back. It's about the guys they produce themselves, and they do produce a lot of their own talent. I mean, they've young Doak. So we could list them all, and they're not even like they've had so many backs that they've shifted them out. I mean, you've got Farrell down in Munster, you've got Whitten over in England. There's loads of guys. They produce loads.
Absolutely.
And there's there's they who shall not be spoken of, and there's lots. A lot of guys with not many guys with single digits on the back, but they produced a few. Dave McCann's a very good player. Ruben Carruthers looks like he might be a very talented player. What's his face? Ian Henderson. If he could, I mean, he seems to be going. He seems to have entered a phase of permanently been injured. Tom O'Toole is really only nominally a Leinster player. I think he was born here, but he came up through the Ulster system. So there's lots of guys that they have, but somebody isn't getting them all pointed in the right direction at the right time in the right frame of mind.
Brent Pope was on off the ball the other night, and he dropped a big hint that Will Connors could be off to Ulster next season. Don't know whether that's going to happen or not, but he did mention it.
Yeah.
It may happen, it may not happen, but you could kind of throw a stick at the Leinster headquarters and find somebody will talk about going somewhere, because we're in that position. I mean, back row. I mean, you talk about in order to win something, you have to have two players for every position. In back row, we've got a back row for every position. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
yeah.
So there's always a good chance that you're going to be right, even if you're wrong.
Yeah. So there was some other good games in the and a very similar game to ours was the Edinburgh Munster game. Edinburgh got off to a flying start, and then I think they scored 3 quick tries, and then Munster pulled them back in the second half, and I think scored something like 24 unanswered points in that second half. And of course, the PR mill starts rolling again, doesn't it? And Munster.
How many corners is this now?
Yes, well, back to where they started again now. Yeah, beat South Africa,
beat the World
the European Cup. Anyway,
the latest rumor is that they decided to dispense with the services of Fekitoa.
Heard that, yeah.
It came from Murray Kinsella, which leads me to think that there might be something more. I mean, Fekitoa hasn't really played that well since he's come in, but it takes a while to settle into a new club when you come to it.
He did the PR for Munster at the European launch.
Yeah, he was over at the launch, yeah.
And he was kind of saying he's finding it difficult to settle in. So maybe there is something in that,
But, I mean, it's hard for every player. I mean, remember, Easton Asiwa found it hard. The greatest, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest Leinster player of all time, found it hard to settle in when he first arrived in Leinster. But he did. And then you look at Fekitoa, and he's a new player in a new club, yes, but he's also a new player in a club where all the guys around him are also trying to learn new stuff, new processes, new systems, new tactics. So he finds himself in a very, very difficult situation. And the guy I'd compare him to, funnily enough, is Jean de Villiers. If anyone remembers, Jean de Villiers' first 6 months in Leinster, Munster, he stank the place out. Absolutely dreadful. But he turned it around. So I don't know. There might be something more to it than that, but I wouldn't rush to judge a guy who's a new guy in a new club with a new coach trying new things.
But then the French guy Frisk seems to be playing very well, and there's a lot of positivity behind him, and him being fast tracked into the Emerging Ireland tour and all that kind of stuff. So.
They were supposed to be. They were looking to them to form a partnership. But one thing I'd say about Fekitoa, though, he was in Wasps, wasn't he? He didn't It's not like this is his, and he was in France as well, was he?
Yeah.
Like this isn't his first rodeo. It's not like he's away from home for the first time and blah 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 blah. He's used to integrating into new teams in new countries. So. I'm not putting it all down to him by any means. It's maybe some players and teams don't gel, doesn't work out for them for whatever reason. I'm not placing the blame on either him or Munster, but just some.
But look,
partnerships are not compatible.
We've had a couple of high-profile second-row signings that it didn't work out. for us
Absolutely.
over the years, you know. So
Shane Douglas, anybody? Stephen
and
Sykes,
Sykes,
anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Nathan Hines.
yeah. Well, Connacht's got their show back on the road, and they had a good win over Benetton. It's good to see them kind of recovering, but like they're so inconsistent. Like they could have a good bonus point win 1 week and be hammered. Although interesting, I see that they have decided to rest all their internationals for the European Cup, so they're going down the French route.
Putting all their eggs in the URC basket, I think that's probably a good thing. Get them up the rankings in the URC would be no bad thing.
Well, the only way that the Challenge Cup is any use to them is if they win it. That's a long road and a difficult road. Maybe when they come out the other side of, this group of games, they'll still be in a position to do something with it. I don't know. It's just to go back to what you're saying, Jay, about Connacht being inconsistent, and 1 week good, 1 week bad. I think a lot of that consistency or inconsistency can be attached to whether or not Bundy Aki is playing.
Yeah, definitely. He's such a talent man.
Yeah, and he's a great rugby player. I mean, he has his disciplinary issues, but he's a wonderful footballer. He really is. His pass for Paul Boyle's try at the weekend was just a thing of beauty.
Mm.
Yeah.
The other thing, interesting thing about Connacht just managed to pass Treviso on points difference. They're both in the minus, but Connacht are less in the minus. They're both in 19 points, as are the Sharks, but the Sharks have 2 games in hand. But the interesting thing is between 12th and, let's say, 5th, there's only 5 points. Like, there's a huge amount of teams in that, including Munster, including Connacht. In that kind of, they're only 5 points is 1 bonus point win. Yeah. So it's not an insurmountable, any team that focuses on the league and at the expense of Europe is gonna, it might pay them dividends, get them up into that top 8. We shall see. But it's good to see it so wide open as well. I mean, we're a fair bit clear at the top, but
there was an article in the Guardian today or yesterday about the Champions Cup launch, and how they took the point that in 2004 it was universally recognised that the Champions Cup, or the Heineken Cup as it was then, was a great competition. It had added a new dimension to the professional rugby landscape. Instead of just having the Six Nations every year, we had this other competition as well that we could also focus on, and it broadened the game. And then 2014 happened, and then COVID happened, and we have this kind of bastardized, gelded competition almost. And compared to what we've been seeing in the URC and probably what the French are seeing in the top 14, it's going to be hard to sell this competition as it stands.
Yeah,
but it's on terrestrial TV now. It's on RTE. Yeah. RTE have Munster game at the weekend, so hopefully that will start generating a bit more interest in it, because I presume that there's not many people with BT Sports subscriptions here. Like, if you're going to get
the other thing that they were mentioning was so we say it's Munster playing Toulouse at the weekend in Thomond Park, which is a game to conjure with no matter what the competition or what the state of the competition is. It's Munster against Toulouse in Thomond Park. It's great. So you're a casual fan and you ask your rugby following mate, "Oh, you're playing Toulouse on Saturday. Who else is in your group?" Well, it's not so much a group as a 12-team pool, and we play some of the teams once and other teams twice in another pool that's 12 teams, and then there's this round of 16. The whole beauty of the simplicity of the competition, the group of, remember the whole, which is going to be the group of death, who's going to get the group of death, who'll get the Italian team, who'll win the group, who'll finish second in the group, there was all these kind of, but there were fixed points you could talk about. right? And it was all part of the whole. I mean, we remember going away on Heineken Cup weekends, and the most important thing was to find a pub so you could watch every other game because every other game counted.
Yeah.
Now, not so much.
No, it's a shadow of its former self. And for all the alleged improvements they made by getting rid of country representation and turning it to league representation, and to be fair, there was some of that needed.
But sorry, is this not coming from the French and the English clubs that don't want to play as many rounds in the competition?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
therefore,
it was.
So like
it's coming from their professional clubs, but I don't think it's
own...
coming from their rugby support, Jay.
Oh well,
we've seen in recent months how diverse how the clubs see the game and how the people who watch rugby see the game is very, very different.
Well, I think we have a very rosy tinted view of the European Cup, obviously because of our success and Ulster's original success and Munster's success then.
Yeah.
But like, you go to an English away Heineken Cup match and get chatting to the English fans about the European Cup. They have an entirely different view of it. Like,
well, Europe is not popular in England anyway, so no matter what.
Oh, well, I mean, like half the people do. I know a lot more want to go back into Europe, but I remember I couldn't get over it. Maybe we played Bath here in Dublin in the old Lansdowne Road, so it must have been back before, in the noughties. And talking 05, 04, I don't know. I was talking to a Bath supporter going in, and he was saying, no, our focus is the Guinness Premiership. Roll forward 10 years, I was in Northampton, and I had a similar conversation at halftime with a Saints fan, and he had the same thing. He said it would be on his low, like he'd said, I'd support the Saints first, then I'd support, like, if I was going to go and pay to go to matches, I'd go to watch Saints in the league. Then I'd go and watch an England game, and then my third choice of spending money to go to a game would be go to a European Cup game. Like, that's the rank or the interest level. Like, we see it entirely differently. I think we're outliers of it. I think we're the outliers.
I agree with you entirely. I mean, this whole idea of the European Cup as a premier competition is a very Hiberno-centric view. It's what we think in Ireland. In France, it's not the case. And now you can argue that France, that's disproved by French teams doing so well in the semis the last couple of years. But the answer to that is, well, who else is going to get there? Because the English teams have been crap. The Welsh and the Scottish are non-entities, and there's really only Leinster and perhaps Munster from Ireland, and Ulster if they don't boil over. So, I mean, the fact that the French have done well at the knockout stages is no proof of their commitment to the competition. It's just proof that even on an average day, they're better than the mediocrities in England. Well, and I agree with you. But the point I'm making is, the point I'm making was the setup was one that was guaranteed to generate excitement
100%.
Across a broad bunch of people. The setup now is not. It's guaranteed to generate a certain amount of yawning, quite frankly. And you'd really have to question that if this castrato of a competition continues next year, is it actually worthwhile persisting with? Compared to the URC, compared to what we saw last week, is Gloucester coming to town and getting 70 points put on them? Is that a thing?
One thing I'll say is, and I probably said this before, but competitions seem to be ranked in the order of how old they are. Like the top 14, there's fellas' great granddads played in the fucking thing. Even the Guinness Premiership or the whatever it's called now, the Sumyoke Premiership is, it traces its roots back to the 80s. The Heineken Cup traces its roots back to the big dawning of professionalism, whereas the URC / Celtic League / 50 other things is only 2002. So, the leagues pretty much exist. Their importance exists in that order. So the top 14 is the most important competition in Europe. The Premiership is the next most important competition in Europe. The Heineken Cup is the next most important competition. And then the URC is the next most important competition, and that seems to be.
Well, I think the word important is quite subjective.
Of course,
the Premiership is of no importance to me whatsoever.
well, that's true.
Uh,
Chimney pots,
sure
Dave, chimney pots.
and I'm sure that the top 14 is of no importance to a lot of Premiership viewers, Premiership watchers, because they can't watch it because of TV stuff and all that. So, I mean, we spent a long time on this kind of show saying that people should go for the URC. It's a great league. You should give it a chance. The more people that go, the better it'll be. Then it kind of fell off a cliff maybe 4 years ago, in terms of it just the quality wasn't there. 2 years ago, or last year, the quality came back big time. And the URC as a competition is the match of anything we saw in Europe last year, except maybe the final.
Well, here's I phrased that badly. Here's what I actually meant. The French competition is older than the Heineken Cup, therefore they're more into it.
Oh yeah, yeah, okay, yeah.
The English competition is older than the Heineken Cup, therefore they're more into it. The URC is less aged than the Heineken Cup, therefore the teams who play in that are more into the Heineken Cup.
The word is younger, John. I realize it's not a word you want to use, but the word is younger.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. I mean, we do tend to rank things by their seniority in terms of, you know, just their age and stuff like that. So, but do you, if we were a year or two the Heineken Cup in this format, do you see it surviving?
No, it's pretty shit. I mean, I'm going to France next week, and I'm going to England in January, but I'm not as happy about it, shall we say, or I'm not looking forward to it as much as I would have done 5 years ago. You know, I can see it withering on the vine a little bit if things don't like. This was originally supposed to be a COVID type solution, and they decided to carry it on for another year. If they don't do something next year to go back to where they've been, not 6 pools of 4, but whatever we had, 5 pools of 4, something better than what we have now. I'd say it will kind of lose its, especially with the URC improving in quality, like you say, Dave.
I think one thing that we haven't mentioned is the South African teams coming into both. Well, obviously they've come into the URC for the last few seasons, but they're also, this is their first season in the Heineken Cup or the Champions Cup.
That'll be interesting.
And there's huge enthusiasm from the South Africans because they can see that it's an opportunity for their clubs to make money, because they weren't making any money when they played in Super Rugby, and it has sort of eaten itself the way that the whole format changed to. There's 3 teams coming into it. The three of their clubs are in the, like, we didn't really wrap up on the other URC results, but there was 4 games against 4 South African teams played against 4 Welsh teams, 4 victories to the South African teams. Like, they are bringing so much. They're in 2nd, 4th, and 5th position in the leagues. Sorry, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th position in the league. You know, they are going to be a huge. Like, I'm really looking forward to seeing how they get on in the European Cup when they're thrown against, you know, the other elite clubs from around Europe. I think Sharks play Quins, Clermont play the Stormers, and the Bulls play Lyon. So, but they're going to be some good games. You know,
I agree with that, Jay. But one thing about it is, one of the things that turned the English fan against European Cup was their elite clubs getting ass whoopings from Irish teams. Now, if you add South African teams giving them ass whoopings, I don't think that'll
but there's a huge
the competition anymore.
But there's a huge misnomer. If you speak like, they don't have a clue. They don't, like, a lot of British people don't really understand what happens in Ireland. Maybe they don't read our media. They don't see. When we were growing up, even now, we're so influenced by what happens in Britain because we have all 30 TV stations it's not reciprocated in the UK. So they haven't a clue about a lot of our culture, but they've also done, when you speak about rugby to them, they haven't a clue. They're all under some impression that Leinster, Munster, Ulster, and Connacht have unlimited budgets, and like, oh, we don't have a salary cap, as if like by not having a salary cap means that we somehow have 50 million euros to spend on each of our provincial sides, like some of the French clubs, for example. And that's where they get this idea from. And even some of the Welsh clubs are now propagating some of this nonsense. But I think that it's really it's from the IRFU, or whether to employ some sort of PR group, a person to come out and start putting our side of the situation out, because what's going to happen is we're going to have no one left to play, because the Welsh and the Scottish believe that they can't compete against the Irish clubs, and the English are even saying it now. So you're taking away three of the home nations, or of the Six Nations, away from our opponents.
Is there any point in preaching to the bankrupt? No, well, that's a fair point. I mean, but the other side of that is that, who cares what they think? I mean, the Welsh aren't going anywhere. The head of the Premiership was up in front of the digital communications media, the Department of Communication, Media and Sport, Culture, Media and Sport, last week in Parliament. And the head of the Premiership said when asked a question by a Welsh MP, said they have no interest in bringing Welsh clubs into the Premiership. Just put the kibosh on the idea completely. The Welsh have no choice. And if the Welsh have no choice, the Scots have no choice.
But Welsh rugby is eating itself at the moment. No, the Welsh rugby is eating itself at the moment. There's huge civil war going on currently between the way that the local clubs won't vote themselves out of being the power brokers within, and therefore they still want to control budgets and so on of the professional teams. The professional teams want to just go and have a similar structure as that if you go onto, for example, a Leinster Rugby website, there's a Leinster Rugby, which is the professional entity, and Leinster Domestic, which is Leinster looking after all the clubs and so on. That doesn't exist in Wales, and there's huge friction between the two entities at the moment over there, and there's no budgets. They haven't agreed a budget for each of the regional sides, and as a result, the professional players are saying, well, I've got to look after my future, and I've got to find somewhere to have a gig next year, because I don't know whether I'm going to be employed by Ospreys or Cardiff or whoever, and I'm going to go somewhere else and find employment elsewhere. It's a bastard. It's an absolute train wreck of an organisation.
There's nothing that can be done about it because of the way Welsh rugby is set up. But there is one way to fix it, and that is for the WRU to only pay salaries of players employed by the WRU.
Yeah, well,
let the regions go, let the clubs go, let them go. Set up their own teams, set up their own regional teams with players they play that are contracted to them, that play for them, because I don't like the idea of imposing a system that we think is great because it works for us on another country. But Wales has enough similarities to the Irish setup. It's a minority sport. It's relatively restricted area-wise. It has to face competition from a behemoth of a sport, in their case, soccer. That, there are enough similarities. But this kind of mix 'em, gather 'em system that they have doesn't work. Not working for them. It has failed. The idea of the regionalisation, the half-assed job they did of it, do you know what it is? It's the Champions Cup of regionalisation. It's a half-assed, gelded, castrated kind of setup. Get rid of it.
Yes,
set up regions.
Unfortunately, it'll
never happen. It can't happen because Welsh rugby won't vote for that. And the way Welsh rugby is run, the clubs have a huge amount of power in it, and they're all very self-interested.
Yeah, but the clubs are the level below. The clubs that have the votes are the level below your Ospreys and your whatever.
Yeah.
The problem is,
but they own that. They have half shares in those in those regions.
Exactly, but the problem is that it's 20 years next September since they regionalised, and anything you do now is going to make a third abortion of a job. Like there was years and years where the clubs and the regions and the whole thing was, we want to go back to our regions, but you can't. They're not strong enough to play in Europe. Well, if you do what you're saying, Dave, and scrap everything and go for union-controlled teams,
Nuclear option.
The nuclear option, you've then got a third level. So you've got regional fans, club fans.
But there's no regions. It's the regionals be gone.
The regions are gone now because they've no funding, because the WRU isn't funding them anymore. The WRU should just pull funding from professional rugby in Wales, except for players it directly employs. It would cause havoc, right? It would take 5 years. The Welsh team would win 4 wooden spoons in a row, but eventually the evolutionary process would settle down. Now, that's never going to happen. And to a certain extent, I don't want it to happen because there are lots of good fans of Scarlets. There are lots of good fans of Ospreys, lots of good fans of Blues and of Dragons who really have bought into those regions and were fans of the parent clubs, if you like, and who love their rugby. And I hate to cause them pain. But to a certain extent, Welsh rugby has to do something. Now, I know it's a bit of a syllogism to say this is something, it has to do this, but it has to do something.
We shall see.
Indeed. Well, they did do something at the weekend or over the weekend. They got rid of their head coach and they've reappointed Warren Gatland.
Wayne Pivac, he was the problem, all right.
Allegedly.
What do you mean allegedly?
Is it official?
Oh yeah, he's gone.
Yeah, I knew he was gone,
Gatland is the new. It's done deal. Gatland has his new laser and everything.
Gatland is there until the next Rugby World Cup in France, but with an option to stay until the one in Australia for 4 more years.
Yeah, I heard that. I just wasn't sure it was confirmed. Sorry.
Yeah.
One significant difference and one significant problem for Gatland. He doesn't have Sean Edwards.
Yeah, they haven't finalised his backup team because Sean Edwards has signed a long-term deal over in France. I heard him on the Good, the Bad, and the Rugby podcast about 6-8 weeks ago. And he basically said, they were saying to him, would you consider the England job? He said, look, offer me a long-term contract and I'll go. Now, obviously, he's not going to negotiate over a podcast, but that's his attitude. He just wanted a long-term contract, and France offered it to him, and that's where he went.
Well, Eddie Jones has a long-term contract in the USA, as far as I know. So, problem with long-term contracts is they can get torn up if you don't produce results. But anyway.
I just have to say, I got it completely and utterly wrong about Eddie Jones, didn't I? Last week when I said that they weren't going to sack him. A week is a long time in politics. It's an even longer time in rugby.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I'd say about Gatland is he was there for so long that how is he going to motivate the players again? Like it's kind of going backwards. We're going back to Gatland. You know what I mean? I mean, the other guy wasn't there. He was only there, 2-3 seasons? So it's
maybe he'll sweep the decks. Maybe he'll get rid of all. Maybe he'll start to bring through a new team. For
a long time, we had sort of the opposite, like under Kidney after the initial Grand Slam under Kidney, when our results were pretty poor just before Schmidt came in. The Leinster was winning European Cups. Ulster got to the final of the European Cup. The Irish results were beaten in Rome. Irish results were pretty poor.
Peter O'Mahony on the wing.
We were getting beaten. We got beaten 60-0 in New Zealand. Whereas Wales, at the same time, their regional teams were pretty dire. They were doing very little in Europe or in the URC or Celtic League at that time. Yet they seemed to produce these miraculous results at Six Nations time and World Cups. I mean, Gatland got them to 2 World Cup semi-finals. He did seem to have some sort of Midas touch at that level, and he kind of papered over a huge amount of cracks within their whole regional rugby structure.
Can he go back there? Can he? That's my point. Can he go back there?
That's the question. I mean, I'd look on Gatland, or I'd look on his time as not dissimilar to Kidney's time in charge of Munster. He took a job with an already successful bunch of players, if you remember. Mike Ruddock won a Grand Slam as well.
Mm-hmm.
He had a successful group of players, including a lot of young players like Alan Wynne-Jones and Liam Williams and George North. All those guys were young during his prime, but he never really evolved the team. And the team still hasn't evolved. And it's how long's he gone now? 2-3 years since he initially went. And the team hasn't evolved at all because the players aren't there.
They did win a Grand Slam, but it might have been the remnants
Red card Grand Slam.
Yeah, that was the red card Grand Slam.
Yeah.
But I don't think the players are there. You look at Wales's underage results; they're pretty shocking. Mm-hmm. You've got a situation now where young Welsh players don't want to play, or up until recently because they've changed regulations again, didn't want to play for the Welsh under-20s because it was a disqualifying level. So they were struggling to develop players coming through because if they were disqualified, it would affect their ability to earn money in the English game. So they had all these problems, and it affected their age grade rugby to the point where, I mean, did Wales take the wooden spoon this year? I think they might have done. I mean, Italy beat them. Italy beat them twice that weekend. So it was pretty poor stuff. Look, he's got a big job on his hands. But I mean, the thing about Gatland is Gatland's a really successful coach. I know we all kind of don't like him because he can be brusque. And he fell out with Irish rugby big time, which was not entirely his fault. Although he should have been more cognizant of the politics involved in Irish rugby. He was here long enough. But it wasn't entirely his fault, and he kind of he held a chip about that. His teams didn't. We all talk about Warren Ball, and his teams were never attracted to work. But he was very successful. He was an extremely successful coach, as you say. He won a couple of Grand Slams. He won a couple of European Cups. You know, he's probably the most success. I mean, we like to think about Joe Schmidt being super successful. Warren Gatland's far more successful than Joe Schmidt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have the height of respect for him. I actually had a few whiskies with him one night in 2013, just before the Lions tour. He wasn't giving anything away, needless to say. But he's the kind of guy who...
And so just to come back, you mentioned Lions tour, John. Players really like him. His Lions tours were happy tours. Players really liked them. He made sure, because his wife ran the family side of things, but it's all part of that holistic approach. He ran really, really happy tours, which hasn't always been the case either.
The thing about him is he doesn't like to bend the knee to perceived superiors. That's his Achilles heel, really. He doesn't like... He's kind of the working man's coach, like, you know what I mean. He's a man of the people in his own head.
Chippy.
He's chippy, exactly. And if somebody rubs him up the wrong way, who's in authority over him, he doesn't. And I think that had a lot to do with his falling out. I know there's a lot of politics went on there. We won't go into it all now, but you know, that's what he's like, and he does stuff that he's great with the mind games. He does stuff that confuses other teams, and he does stuff that you think, why is he doing that? That's ridiculous. But next thing you know, you're after losing a game to him. You know, he just has, even if it's something ridiculous like dropping Brian O'Driscoll, like the whole of Irish rugby hated him because he dropped Brian O'Driscoll for what would have been his last Lions test. They would have won that test with or without Brian O'Driscoll, was the simple answer to that. I believe he did that just literally to throw something into, to get some people talking about stuff, take the heat off his players. That's his big. This is one of his big strategies.
The other mark of that is it doesn't seem to have, like, doing that didn't seem to cause any great rifts in the camp in that Lions tour, either with the Irish players or the other players, because he runs a happy camp. But at the same time, there's that element of, can you go back? Should you go back to where you once were? I'm not sure it's a great idea.
That's it for me. I think it won't serve Welsh rugby well, but I'm happy to eat my words if he makes a success of it.
Mm.
Well, going by my record over Six Nations coaches, I think he'll be a tremendous success.
Particularly his first game is against Ireland in February. So it'll be interesting to see. Anyway,
is it in the stadium or the Aviva, Jay?
It's in Wales.
It's in Wales.
So I guarantee you he's going to start a row about the roof.
The roof.
Guarantee
definitely the roof. Yeah.
Or he's going to say the Welsh players hate the Irish players, and they've always hated them, and they're going to, go around their houses and shoot their wives, or they'll find something.
We'll see. Anyway, so we play Racing at the weekend ourselves. So unfortunately it's in Le Havre, John, rather than in the indoor arena. But it is where it is, and
we're still going.
We're still going.
Who's Cruise?
So Racing are second in the top 14. Like they've won 8 of their 12 games. So like they're in form, I suppose. They beat Toulon away at the weekend. Pretty good win, 31-14. So like they're not kind of propping up the bottom of the table.
No, I would. They're a bit of an unknown quantity. I believe they've come on a lot in their last kind of 5 games, where they were previously struggling down the bottom at the beginning of the season. But like they've a reasonable amount of international players, so teams like that tend to take a little while to settle. Unfortunately, they seem to be in a bit of a vein of form. But you'd have to think maybe they don't give a shit. They're moving it to Le Havre. It's kind of a bit like it's definitely not a booze cruise though, Dave, because even there is nowhere in Ireland you can go to Le Havre from by boat, and even if you're to go to the UK, it's as easy to go to the Channel Tunnel and have
You don't do Rosslare Le Havre anymore, no?
No, I think that's gone. I think that's
it's once a week, I think.
Oh, is it still there? Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it's only one a week sailing.
Well, I mean, Racing Metro are getting 40,000 into the La Défense Arena for the concert. They're getting 30,000, we'll say, into Le Havre for this game. And they're getting a huge bag of cash from the commune for moving the game there.
Mm.
Yeah.
When people wonder how come French clubs can afford to sign big-name players, this is why.
Yeah, it's great for the bank balance, but is it going to win them the game? I'd say it's going to be more difficult for them to win in Le Havre than it is in La Défense Arena. So, we'll see how that goes. I'm not saying we're going to hockey them or anything, but it just says to me that they're less interested in rugby and more interested in money, as you say, Dave.
But French clubs are always less interested in Europe up until the knockouts.
Yeah.
That's always the way.
Didn't they do the exact same thing in, was it the semi-final of Europe this year? They played against La Rochelle and they moved the game to Lens.
Yeah.
Or Lille, sorry, it was Lille, I think. And I remember O'Gara was giving out yards. He was saying it's ridiculous and it's a massive journey. It's a massive journey for his all the people from, and I think it was on Sundays. From memory, it was on a Sunday. So obviously people had to drive up, go to the game, try and getting back late, work on Monday and so on. So
as far as I know,
but as a result, there was about 14,000 in the stadium when it should have been, full in the La Défense Arena.
Well, as far as I know, they played us 3 times in Europe and lost all 3. So we'd like to keep our 100% record. We had them once in the pool stages in about 2011.
Yeah.
One where I think Chabal was playing for them and Isa crippled him in the beginning of the game, and that was the last we heard of him. And then we went away in the snow to play them.
Yeah, that was a bloody. I was at that game. That was a bloody cold night.
That was in Colombia, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then obviously the Heineken Cup final in 2018 was the third, where they came the closest to beating us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm hopeful that we can keep. Our biggest problems are a potential missing Johnny Sexton. My feeling is he'll start. And a potential missing Tyg Furlong. That one I'm not so sure. We're a bit, now that Porter's moved back to Loosehead, we're looking great at Loosehead, but we're not looking at like Alatoa. There's not, it's down to either Clarkson or Vak Abdeladze if he's out. So yeah, it's not. I wouldn't be getting too confident if Furlong is out.
And you wouldn't take Marty Moore back, John.
Take him back this weekend. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
No problem. But yeah, anyway, I wouldn't take him ahead of Alatoa, but I would definitely take him behind Alatoa, i.e. when Furlong's out, he'd be absolutely, I'd love him to be in there. But anyway, other than that, we seem to be reasonably well served. Lowe is okay as far as I know. Came through his first game. Gibson Park is okay. He's played a few games now, but I played for Ireland and one for Leinster. So
the only real doubts are over Sexton, Tadhg Furlong, and there's a minor doubt over Natai is returning to training this week, whatever that means. So those are the only real doubts. Well,
he'll be there. I'd say him and Sexton are going to make the plane. That's my feeling. If Sexton is in any way fit, he'll go. Because this is the important game from a European perspective. We've plenty of Six Nations is a good bit away. We've plenty of leeway in the league, and we'll get through against Leicester with Ross Byrne a lot easier than we'll get through against
Racing.
I nearly said La Rochelle. Racing. So I think if Sexton is in any way fit, they'll give him a tinkle on this one because it's a different team with him in it.
It's also like it's his last European campaign, but it's also Lancaster's last year.
And the finals in Dublin.
Yeah, but there's like a lot of it seems like there's a lot of unfinished business with the whole Lancaster thing, like they had this big, and they've been going on about it now since 2018, the Drive for Five, and like they've fallen at the last hurdle twice. It just feels like that, he's obviously going to Racing, so I'm sure he wants to
lay down a marker.
Well, go over there and kind of show them what they're going to get, rather than just meekly walking in the door saying, "Yeah, you beat us there." But anyway, I think that there's, I remember I had this sort of debate with somebody recently about Lancaster, and they were saying like ultimately his tenure hasn't been as successful as we all think it is. Like, he won the league, but like the league, there was no one else. I mean, like Leinster A would probably beat Leinster B in the final or certainly get to the quarterfinal. But they won one European Cup, but were beaten by two, and then the teams we couldn't beat were Saracens and La Rochelle, and we still can't beat them. Was what your man was saying. I just thought it was quite an interesting view that he would look at it, and so therefore this season he said like this season would make or break Lancaster's legacy in the club.
Yeah, well, if he gets the 5th star, he'll never have to buy a pint in Dublin again, and it's as simple as that. And as we said last week, Grand Slam, Heineken Cup, URC, and then we'll see what happens in the World Cup.
You don't want much, do you, John?
Nah.
And Marty Moore back to Dublin.
Marty Moore back to Dublin just to keep.
You heard it here last.
I think that's a bit of a harsh assessment of Lancaster. It's based entirely that everything he does is based on trophies. No, that's a valid point in terms of sporting thing, because ultimately it's a win-loss game. But if you look at the systems he's put in place, you look at the players he's brought through, the players he's developed, he's developed that have gone on to basically be an international team in and of themselves. And that's not to do down the contributions of the other provinces, but he's brought through so many top quality players or improved the ones that were there. That I think reducing it mainly to trophies is a bit reductive.
Also, he's never made it onto the pitch for a final ever.
I'm sure he looks back at certain games. I personally, I still think that they made a mistake in the semi-final against La Rochelle that time, with the substitution they made. Saracens cheated, but I still think that he will look back on those games and say, yes, I was. I'd say that he looks back on them and thinks, those were games that I could have done more in, or I could have been better in, and his own view of his legacy will be not tainted, but will be will have a shadow from those games that he lost. You always remember the top guys always remember the games they lose. They never remember the games they win.
That's true.
Yeah, indeed. Well, anyway, boys, as ever, thanks very much. Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us Facebook or Twitter, please give us a like and a subscription. Cheers. Thank you.